The next day was the weekend. Jacob dragged Charlie along and they drove to the vintage market early in the morning. Jacob was full of energy. He waved to Charlie as he got out of the car. "Come on," he said. "I'm going to show you how to find a real bargain." With that, he strode into the vintage market. Charlie had to hurry to keep up, looking around as he walked. On weekends, the vintage market was much more crowded than usual. The antique shops on both sides were packed tightly together, and the vendors setting up stalls were so numerous that they blocked the whole street. There were also many vendors who just spread a plastic sheet on the ground, piled high with various antiques and artifacts, trying to attract customers. Charlie glanced around casually and saw almost nothing authentic. It was all junk, used by shady vendors to rip off clueless people and tourists. A lot of the tourists who bought the fakes were completely clueless, holding their imitations and grinning, thinking they'd gotten a great deal. "Right here!" Jacob stopped in front of a simple stall, unable to hide his excitement. A few tourists were standing by the stall, looking through the items. Jacob rushed into the crowd, afraid of missing out. Charlie took a look. The stall was just a piece of wax paper spread on the ground, with dozens of mud-stained, so-called antiques on it. Things like a racehorse figurine, presidential medallions, brass goblets, red coral bracelets, and some yellowed artistic penmanship and paintings. It was a dazzling display, but one casual look told Charlie that it was all fake. The stall owner was a thin, dark-skinned man wearing denim. His hair was greasy and a mess. He had a simple, honest-looking face and appeared a bit slow. "Look at this!" Jacob called to Charlie. He pointed to a colorful, wide-mouthed bottle and said in a low, "This is the bottle that goes with the 2 cups I bought. If I get this, I'll have the whole set, and the price will double." Charlie glanced at the bottle, picked it up, and looked at the owner. "How much is it?" The owner's eyes went wide, and he said, "My dad said at least 20,000, not a cent less." When Jacob heard this, he almost laughed. He quickly whispered to Charlie, "This guy has no idea what he's got. Let's buy it fast before someone else snags it." After saying that, he rushed to pay. Just then, Charlie quickly grabbed his hand and smiled. "Dad, this thing isn't worth 20,000. Let's not buy it." "What?" Jacob was stunned. "Then how much do you think it's worth?" Charlie held up his hand in front of the owner. "This much." 5,000? The owner asked, staring. Charlie shook his head. "No, 50. The owner stared at Charlie for a few seconds like he was from another planet, then suddenly shouted, "Do you even know what you're looking at? This is a real antique from my grandfather. It's a genuine treasure. You city people are always trying to rip us off." Jacob got anxious and tugged on Charlie's arm. "Stop talking nonsense. You're going to ruin the deal." Charlie just smiled, picked up the bottle and turned it over. He scraped away some of the yellow mud on the bottom with his finger, pointed to a tiny slit, and said, "Dad, look at this." The slit was extremely small. If Charlie hadn't pointed it out, nobody would have ever noticed it. Inside the slit, a row of very small letters was visible. "Made in the United States." Jacob was stunned. His mouth fell open, and he couldn't react for a long time. Suddenly, he snapped out of it, his face turning red. He pointed at the owner and yelled, You're a cheat!" Charlie took the bottle, showed it to the owner, and said, "The manufacturer wouldn't dare to openly fake an antique. You put this label on here on purpose. You're pretty clever, knowing you could cover it up with mud. So let me ask you, $30. Will you sell it? This?" The owner was stunned for a second. Suddenly, the honest look vanished from his face, and he slapped his forehead with a grin. "Gentlemen, I was in a rush this morning, and I guess I grabbed the wrong bottle." "You grabbed the wrong one," Charlie smiled, picking up a muddy hip flask. He dug into the mud on the opening, held it up to the sun, and said seriously, "This one isn't wrong. It was made in Sioux City. On the hip flask, there was a row of small, transparent characters, made by Amish workshops. I can't read. Who knows what's written on it? The owner saw he wasn't making a sale. He sneered and started to wrap up his waxed canvas, ready to make a run for it. This time, Jacob was completely aware of what was happening. He was furious, realizing he'd been played for a fool. He grabbed the owner and roared, "You liar! Give me back my money!" "What money? I've never seen you before." The owner struggled, and fake pennies and marble stallions kept falling out of the waxed canvas he was holding. One of the marble stallions hit the ground without breaking. It looked like it was made of hard plastic. "If you don't give me my money back, I'm calling the cops," Jacob screamed, his lungs burning with anger. As they wrestled, something fell out of the owner's arms. The moment it hit the ground, Charlie frowned and stared at it. It was a fist-sized white pebble, just like one you'd find on a riverbank, gray and dull. But there was one difference. This pebble had the words "peace and wealth" carved into it. The lettering was crude and poorly done, clearly carved by hand. You could find stones like this at any tourist trap, and they weren't worth anything. No wonder the owner hadn't put it out for sale. However, Charlie strode over and picked up the stone. Suddenly, he felt a rush of energy. He had felt a strange aura coming from this thing. It wasn't really an aura, but more like a kind of energy, a magnetic field, that was strongly pulling him in. Charlie knew this had to be the spiritual energy he'd read about in the mystic knowledge. Reiki was a mysterious, long-lost energy. It couldn't just transform a person's physical health. It could be cultivated to produce effects that seemed impossible to ordinary people. Charlie was thrilled. He calmly weighed the pebble in his hand and asked, "Is this yours?" The owner froze for a moment, then nodded subconsciously. "Yes." "How much for the stone?" Jacob was surprised and asked, "Why are you buying that piece of junk? Don't you know this crook sells nothing but fakes? It's just a rock. I'll buy it and use it as a paperweight or something," Charlie said with a smile. The owner took the opportunity to break away from Jacob's grip and sneered at Charlie. "You really want to buy it?" Charlie nodded. "I do." The owner suddenly perked up and said grandly, "My friend, you have a good eye. Don't let its appearance fool you. This pebble has an extraordinary origin. It was a paperweight from the embellished case in Lord Quinn's study." Charlie didn't have time for his long-winded story and interrupted impatiently. "Spare me the sales pitch and get to the point." The owner laughed and said, "Ha, since you're an expert, then 20,000. Charlie said dismissively, "Are you crazy?" "One price, 300. If you don't sell it, I'm calling the police and reporting you for fraud." 300? The owner sighed and said with a dry smile, "All right, friend, you know your stuff. 300 it is." Charlie smiled slightly and closed his hand around the stone. Jacob was confused. He had no idea why Charlie would buy such a worthless rock. Just as he was about to ask, a sharp voice cut in from nearby. "Hey, that's a nice stone. My boss wants it." Hearing the voice, Charlie frowned and looked up. He saw a young man in a white linen suit, black shoes, and a wristful of bracelets walking toward them. Even though it was broad daylight, he was wearing a pair of antique gold-rimmed glasses with round black lenses. The young man was followed by 4 or 5 bodyguards. Compared to him, his bodyguards looked way more intimidating, and everyone nearby quickly scattered to avoid trouble. Well, if it isn't Mr. Stephen. As soon as the owner saw the young man, his face lit up and a stream of compliments poured out. "Mr. Stephen, why didn't you give me a heads up that you were coming today? I would have rolled out the red carpet for you." "All right, cut the crap. I'm just looking around today." The young man waved his hand impatiently. He strode forward, glanced at the stone in Charlie's hand, and looked up at the owner. "Irvin, wrap this stone up for me. My dad needs a paperweight for his desk. This will be perfect." The owner, Irvin Jones forced a smile and shot a pained look at Charlie before turning back to flatter Stephen. "Mr. Stephen, this is really awkward. This gentleman just bought the stone." "Honestly, it's nothing special. It's just a paperweight, that's it. I have much better items set aside just for you. Why bother with a worthless rock? Only the best is good enough for a man of your status." So the owner's name was Irvin Jones, and he clearly knew this young man. Charlie had to admit he was impressed with Irvin's sales pitch. The guy could talk his way out of anything. Irvin quickly pulled out a faux marble stallion, his words tumbling out. "Mr. Stephen, this was a favorite of a former First Lady. Look, the material is flawless, top quality. Let's not haggle. For you, Mr. Stephen, I'll give you the same price you paid for that ceramic cup yesterday. $9,000, and it's yours." Jacob was speechless. The same kind of fake ceramic cup he almost bought for $300, and this kid, Stephen, had actually paid $9,000 for one. "Cut the crap," Stephen said impatiently, kicking Irvin aside. He said arrogantly, "I want this stone. Give it to me. I'll give you $20,000 for it." When Irvin heard $20,000, his eyes lit up. He turned to Charlie and said, "Hey buddy, how about you let Mr. Stephen have it?" Charlie frowned and said coldly, "I already bought it, and I'm not interested in selling." "Who said anything about selling? You haven't paid yet, so it belongs to whoever pays first," Stephen shot back. Stephen said impatiently. He pulled a wallet from his jacket, yanked out a thick stack of bills, and slapped them against Irvin's chest. "Here's $20,000. Keep the rest. It's mine." Irvin's eyes lit up. He quickly gathered the cash and smiled at Charlie. "Hey buddy, I also have a beautiful crystal paperweight from a famous collection. It's much better than this one. Why don't you take that one instead?" Charlie just smiled. "Irvin, you don't need to try and pull one over on me, right? I bought this paperweight first, and I'm not interested in giving it to someone else." Seeing that Charlie wouldn't budge, Irvin was in a tough spot. After all, according to the rules of the antique business, the first person to claim an item gets it. If he broke that rule, word would spread, and he'd be run out of the vintage market. Irvin had no choice but to turn back to Stephen. He nodded and said, "Mr. Stephen, this paperweight is really nothing special. I have much better things back at my shop." Before he could finish, Stephen kicked him hard in the side and cursed. "Getting bold, are we? I've bought plenty from you. Now you're siding with some broke nobody over me?" Irvin fell to the ground, clutching his side and groaning. He complained, "Mr. Stephen, if he won't give it to me, there's nothing I can do." As he spoke, he gave Charlie a desperate look, trying to signal him to just give up the stone. Just one look at Charlie's simple clothes told Irvin everything he needed to know. This guy had no money, no power, and no influence.
Hey amazing viewers, it's Charlie here. Thanks for sticking with us. By the time of the release of this video, only 11% of our viewers have joined the party by subscribing, and 89% of you might miss out on our next mind-blowing video. So what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and join the exclusive club.